Energy Boutique with your energy forecast for Wednesday, May 3rd. So today we have the moon in Libra all day. So of course, our heart space is wanting to find peace, wanting to find stability, wanting to find happiness and harmony, not only within ourselves, but in our personal relationships. We're very focused on relationships here in this Libran energy. We like to stick in the shallow end of our emotions just because we don't want to go too deep, but there are some aspects here today that will really prevent us from staying in that shallow end. The whole goal of the Libran energy is to bring things into a middle point, a grounding point, a balance point, but we kind of have to sort through the extremes between our heart and our head, and of course the areas of our lives that are kind of chaotic and out of whack, but before we can find that new balanced middle ground. So there are 9 different aspects here today, and 7 of them involve the moon. The moon in Libra will make a positive interaction with Saturn, the Lord of Karma. He rules over our roles and responsibilities, our commitments. Basically, he is illuminating for us, because again, he's in Pisces energy, where it is that we have to dismantle old beliefs, old ideas, old dreams in order to clear the slate and provide the space for us to kind of bring a new determination, a new perseverance to the forefront on what it is that we want to build and create from here. So the moon and Saturn, typically speaking, if this was a negative aspect, we would see negative Nancy and Debbie Downer kind of kick in. We'd be feeling the weight of the roles and responsibilities on our shoulders, on our heart space. But this is a positive interaction. So we're actually like rising to the challenge that our new roles, our new responsibilities, the new goals that we have are pushing us into. There's not as much, I'm going to say, existential dread as normally speaking that Saturn brings us. And for the most part, we're trying to keep things light and fluffy. Again, still very much in that shallow end of the pool. The moon will then make a positive interaction with Uranus. This is definitely suggesting that we're having some very profound shifts in perspective, shifts in understanding, shifts in solutions. And this is something that is definitely going to help propel us moving forward with making some of the changes and transformations to our lives that we know that we need to make. This Uranian energy is in Taurus. So this means that the changes and the epiphanies and the aha moments that we're having are due to our physical realm, our physical bodies, our routines, our relationships, our money matters, our long-term goals. We're basically looking for the issues and we're looking to solve them. And we solve them by negotiation, by compromise, whether within ourselves or with other people, doesn't really matter. When there's a new perspective, a new, I'm going to say, understanding that emerges, we definitely have the ability to kind of leave some of the confusion, leave some of the heavier emotional weight in the past. The moon then interacts with the sun. So again, we have the moon in Libra ruled over by Venus. We have the sun in Taurus ruled over by Venus coming together, making an interaction that brings our past into our present and brings the future into our present in order for us to make some serious decisions. Now, the decisions that we have to make are based off of what it is that we have to address first in order to stabilize our physical realm and our circumstances. Now, this might not be an aha moment that feels good. It might actually be a realization of what isn't working. And even though that we would rather avoid it and bury our head in the sand, we know that we have to address it eventually. And because eclipse season and retrograde season are alive and well, these things are going to kind of formulate and percolate and marinate within us until the universe kind of supports us in expressing ourselves and making those particular changes in our lives. Now, here's where things get interesting. Mercury, ruler of the mental plane, ruler of information, communication, and how it is that we express ourselves, who is retrograde in this Taurus energy, is going to semi-square, which is a little bit of a tension point, a little bit of a conflict, with Venus, the goddess of love, beauty, worth, pleasure, money, who is in Gemini energy. So again, we've been talking about how Mercury rules over Gemini energy and Venus rules over Taurus energy, and they've kind of switched spots. And this is called mutual reception in astrology. What it's kind of doing is, again, if you've listened to the May energy forecast, you would know that May has the vibration of 5, which rules over the heart space, and Mercury and Venus are constantly at each other in order to try and bridge the gap between our heart and our head. We're in eclipse season, we're in retrograde season, which is a realignment, a recalibration type of phase in our lives, but we need to kind of identify where the gaps are, where the distance is, where the disconnect is in order to actually heal it. Well, this is a tension point. This is a conflict. And what happens here is, first of all, the words that we're speaking, first of all, we're in a retrograde, so they're not being heard the way that we want them to be heard. They're not being kind of received and understood in the way that we were hoping for. But even more than that, our words aren't really kind of matching or reflecting what we actually feel. So there is a disconnect between our heart and our head. And the more we try to articulate and get the words just right, the more kind of misunderstandings and confusions we create. We're super hypersensitive, so we're edgy, we're defensive, we are kind of, I'm going to say, ready to fight, if you will. And because Gemini energy that Venus is in does kind of illuminate two very extreme points of view, two different options, two different decisions, we're almost in like two different, very different extreme states of mind when it comes to heartfelt decisions, heartfelt matters, especially where our relationship dynamics are concerned. So there's definitely going to be some difficulties that arise either within ourselves, trying to get our heart and our head on the same page, or realizing that the dysfunction either in our relationships or in our money matters is really creating a very painful wound within us. Or we could see this, again, outside of ourselves in the interactions with the people around us. Either way, we're super hypersensitive, we're highly emotional, we're not thinking right, we're not speaking clearly, we're not receiving other people's words and information correctly either, which just is an absolute shit show of a stage for misunderstandings and for conflict to arise. The moon will then directly oppose with Chiron, the wounded healer. Chiron's over there in Aries energy, and of course Libra and Aries sit across from each other in the zodiac, and so the moon, our emotional space in Libran energy, just wants everybody to get along, just wants everybody to be happy. But the downside of the Libran energy is that we have a tendency to backburner our own wants, needs, and desires just to make other people happy, which goes totally against the Aries energy that Chiron is in. Chiron is the wounded healer, and in Aries energy, we have to think about ourselves. We have to think about what's best for us. We have to think about the changes that we're going through and not necessarily how they are impacting other people, because we can't constantly be factoring other people into the decisions that we need to be making in order to honor our own heart space. So this is definitely going to put us at odds with what it is that we think we should do, because there is a part of us that just wants to focus on doing right by ourselves. But then there's this other part of us that just wants to make other people happy. And we're trying to break these particular patterns and behaviors, but it is going to take a little bit longer for us to actually succeed in those boundaries. And so we might get caught up in not being able to do what is right for us because we put too much worth and value into making other people happy. Either way, it's going to show where the extreme points of view are definitely taking place, where the imbalances are in our energy, time, and efforts, and where it is that our priorities are a little bit mixed up due to the want, need, and desire to make other people happy before we tend to want to make ourselves happy. The moon will then go ahead and interact with Uranus. This time, not in the nicest way as we had earlier. And because of this, this is more going to be about an observation on our confusion, on where it is that we're not gaining clarity, where it is that we are having a hard time changing up our perspective, changing up our mind space, where it is that we're having a hard time accepting the changes and the transformations that we know that we have to make. We're just having a hard time absorbing it. And because of this, it kind of creates a conflict, because the Libran energy wants to be around people, wants that connection because it's so focused on relationships. And when Uranus is not in his best placement, he wants to block everyone out. He wants to just kind of be cold and rigid and push everyone away until we get our own, thing going here and we're on the same page with ourselves. So there is going to be a disconnect on where the confusion in our lives is kind of forcing us to isolate ourselves until we kind of gain perspective on what it is that we want to do. And therefore, there is this conflict because emotionally speaking, we want to be close to people, but intellectually speaking, we can't be around people right now until we figure our own stuff out. The moon is then going to square off, get in the boxing ring with Mars, who of course is in this Cancer energy. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm not trying to curse us here. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that this is likely going to trigger a lot of anger, a lot of agitation, a lot of frustration, even maybe some rage. And it's going to come down to the fact that we are confused on what it is that we should be doing. We are being pulled into different directions. One direction is mainly for ourselves, and the other direction is focusing on other people. And Mars, just in this Cancer energy, isn't able to take action to pursue anything right now. And so that's frustrating all in itself. But emotionally speaking, a square is a tension point for good reason. And again, we are in eclipse season. We're just days away from this full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio that is going to be an absolute shit show emotionally. And the festering, the restlessness, the agitation is definitely starting here and now with this particular aspect. The moon will then interact with Saturn in such a way that is really going to bring the negative Nancy narrative, bring Debbie the Downer out to play. And we are really going to kind of feel the squeeze, the pressure of the roles and responsibilities that we have, the commitments that we've made. And we aren't really feeling as confident as we did earlier on kind of rising to the challenge that Saturn is offering us to move into new storylines, new timelines where new roles and responsibilities are being required of us. And then to make matters even more intense, Mars is going to kind of line up and interact with Saturn. And what this is doing, first of all, we have the God of War and the Lord of Karma kind of coming together. And Mars just wants to go balls to the walls. Saturn wants to pump the brakes. Mars can't really assert himself and aggress himself to make any kind of progress in Cancer energy anyways. Saturn is just as frustrated because he's in Pisces energy, and it's pretty hard to build a solid foundation with the waves, the emotional and spiritual waves crashing against the pillars of the foundation in which we're trying to create. So first of all, there's like this huge lesson of, hey, we got to slow it down a smash. And then there's this other layer of, hey, we have to stop running from our problems. We do have to kind of rise to the challenge and face our obstacles head on. And then all of a sudden there's this like surge of energy that is making it very intense and very urgent. And the more we want to move fast, the more obstacles there seems to be. And the minute that we pull away, suddenly it feels like we're unmotivated and uninspired, and we don't really care to muster up that, that energy, that courage and bravery that we need to move forward. And so it kind of just feels like we're being blocked. All of our efforts, all of our energy, all of our inspiration, we're just being blocked. We couldn't move forward and assert ourselves in any kind of direction right now if we wanted to. We're in eclipse season, we're in retrograde season, but the want, need, and desire to change and get out of this funk is so strong that it's pressurizing us to try and take action when we're not being supported in doing so. So the name of the game here is patience. But none of us have patience right now, and none of us know where we can order it from or where we can buy it. So that tension is building. And again, we are expecting for triggers and activations to take place like a domino effect up until we reach that full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio, where the shadow self is going to come out to play, whether we invite it to or not.